Welcome to No Sleep, where the night never ends, and every whisper in the dark could be something real. Tonight's story isn't just horror. It's a memory, a warning, a door that should have stayed closed. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and whatever you do, don't fall asleep. It all started with the card. A glossy jet black envelope arrived in my mailbox with no stamp, no return address, just my name, etched in shimmering silver ink that shimmered like heat waves. I didn't recognize the handwriting. I hadn't told anyone where I lived, not since the move. Inside was an invitation. You are cordially invited to the Magic Castle, one night only, for the curious and the brave. The date was tomorrow. The address was simply Hollywood Hills, followed by an old crest I didn't recognize, an Ouroboros swallowing its tail, enclosed in a triangle. Elisa was the reason I even considered it. We'd been on 3 dates, and while she smiled at my jokes and touched my arm when she laughed, I knew I wasn't quite there yet. But she loved weird, exclusive shit. Secret speakeasies, hidden restaurants behind dry cleaners, urban legends turned into Instagram selfies. So I texted her the picture of the invitation and added, "Date night? Dress nice. Something magical." She responded almost instantly, "Hell yes. Been dying to go. How did you get that invite?" I didn't answer because I didn't know. The next night, a black car arrived at my apartment right on time. A man in a red velvet suit opened the door and nodded. "Elisa's already inside," he said before I could ask. We drove in silence through twisting roads that coiled up the Hollywood Hills like ivy. I expected to see the city glittering beneath us, but the windows were tinted so dark, I couldn't even see the moon. When the car finally stopped, I stepped out into a hush. No music, no traffic, just a looming mansion that looked stolen from a gothic fairy tale. Towers like candle wax drippings, iron gates twisted into shapes that hurt my eyes if I looked too long. Above the entrance, a sign. The Magic Castle. Carved letters blinked faintly, like they were trying to stay awake. The doorman didn't speak. He just handed me a suit jacket and a black tie, pointing at a small changing room nearby. A sign above it read, "Appearances must deceive." Inside, the walls were lined with old posters, Houdini, Blackstone, Thurston. But one of them was wrong. A magician I didn't recognize. Eyes scratched out, a name I couldn't pronounce. The caption read, "He never escaped." I blinked and it was gone. Another poster took its place. Coin trick. Doves. Elisa was waiting in the lounge, perched at the bar with a glass of something neon green. She looked incredible. Black dress, hair up, lipstick sharp as a blade. She waved me over. "You clean up nicely," she said, her eyes sparkling. "Did you know this place has 5 bars?" she added, sipping her drink. "One on every floor. Some of them move." I laughed. "Move? You'll see," she said, and kissed me lightly on the cheek. For a moment, everything felt perfect. A man walked past us, balancing a cane on his fingertip. Another seemed to pull a live pigeon out of a glass of wine. Behind us, a woman vanished behind a curtain, but never reemerged. The lights flickered. We were ushered from room to room. Every hallway was lined with illusions, floating lanterns, staircases that led nowhere, portraits that followed you with their eyes. It was disorienting and thrilling. In one chamber, a magician asked for my name and wrote it on a card. I watched as he waved his hand, and the ink crawled off the page like an insect, fading into the air. In another, a woman made an apple vanish from my hand, gone before I could blink. Elisa was laughing, clapping, in love with the night. But I started to notice things. A man at the piano who hadn't blinked once in the 20 minutes we watched him. A waiter who walked backwards down a hallway, vanishing behind a mirrored wall. A child sitting alone in the corner of a stairwell. No one spoke to her. Her eyes were black as polished coal. As we made our way toward the grand theater, the big room, they called it, Elisa leaned in. "This place is insane," she whispered. "I think it's more than that," I said, half joking. "It feels alive." She laughed and wrapped her arm through mine. "That's the point." But deep down, something itched in the back of my mind. This wasn't just a magic show. It wasn't even theater. It felt like a test, a trap. And yet, I walked through the doors of the big room anyway. The big room was nothing like I expected. No stadium seating, no rows of plastic chairs. Instead, the audience sat in ornate velvet armchairs, arranged in a half moon around a polished stage. The air smelled like wax and cedar. Everything shimmered, too clean, too perfect, like the memory of a place rather than the place itself. Above us, a chandelier hung low and motionless, its crystals refracting tiny rainbows across the ceiling. The stage curtain rippled gently, though there was no breeze. Elisa leaned into me. "You okay?" "Yeah," I lied. "Just a little buzzed." "From the wine?" "From reality," I muttered. She smiled like she thought I was being clever. A man in a sharp white tuxedo stepped out from behind the curtain. His hair was silver, slicked back so tightly it looked sculpted. He bowed, and the room fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice like silk dipped in static, "tonight you will see things that cannot be explained. You will leave this place changed, though you may not understand how. We offer no apologies." He smiled, wide and wolf-like. "We begin now." The lights dimmed. The chandelier flickered. The first act was classic sleight of hand, until it wasn't. A magician produced a deck of cards and asked for a volunteer. A man in the second row raised his hand and was invited to the stage. He chose a card, placed it back in the deck, and the magician snapped his fingers. "Your card is in your mouth." Laughter rippled through the room. The volunteer chuckled, then froze. He reached up, slowly. His fingers trembled. From between his lips, he pulled a bent playing card, wet, like it had been there all along. It was his. The audience gasped. The man stumbled back to his seat, pale and shaking. The magician bowed and faded behind the curtain. No one clapped. The next illusion was performed by a woman in a blood-red dress. She carried a silver bowl filled with sand and let it trickle onto the floor. From it, she pulled objects: a gold pocket watch, a live fish, a small doll with glass eyes. With a flourish, she dipped her hands into the sand again, and this time came up, holding a bouquet of wilted roses. From the audience, I heard a whisper, "Dead flowers for the dead." I turned, but no one was there. The whisper hadn't come from someone near me. It had come from beneath my chair. During intermission, I went to use the bathroom. The hallway was strangely empty. I passed a man in a janitor's uniform. He didn't speak, just nodded once, eyes wide. I nodded back, uncomfortable. The bathroom mirror was cracked. When I looked into it, I saw Elisa behind me. She was smiling. I turned. No one was there. Back in the big room, the performances grew stranger. One magician walked through a spinning fan without injury. Another pulled teeth from his own mouth and scattered them across the stage like dice. The final act before the main event involved a volunteer climbing into a coffin-sized box. The magician, a sweaty, jittery man with trembling fingers, closed the lid and whispered something against the wood. A beat passed. He opened the box. It was empty. No trapdoor, no smoke. The stage lights remained constant. There was nowhere the man could have gone. The magician removed the sides of the box and left them on the stage. Nothing underneath. No seams in the floor. I leaned forward, searching, my brain trying to make sense of it. Elisa gripped my hand, her nails dug in. Did he just... Yeah, I said, my mouth dry. He did. The magician gave a jerky bow and practically ran off stage. He looked scared. Then I heard it. A soft whimper, a sound like someone sobbing behind the walls. I glanced at Elisa, her head tilted slightly toward the stage, but her eyes weren't following the performer. They were darting toward the sides of the room, watching, calculating. She felt it too. Another whisper, this time closer. He didn't vanish. He was taken. The lights flickered. A new magician stepped forward. He was tall, bald, with deep wrinkles and eyes the color of oil. His voice was a whisper that filled the entire room. For our final demonstration, he said, we will require strength. His gaze swept the crowd and landed on me. You, he said, the strongest man in the room, join me. Elisa gave my hand a playful squeeze. Show him what you've got, strong man. I stood, heart pounding, and walked toward the stage. The spotlight followed me. My footsteps echoed unnaturally loud. Remove your jacket, the magician instructed. We must test your resolve. I slipped it off and laid it on the edge of the stage. He handed me a length of black cord. Tie my hands as tight as you can. I hesitated, then wrapped the cord around his thumbs. I pulled harder. He winced. Tighter, he hissed. Tighter. I obeyed. His skin turned purple. Veins throbbed under the surface. Sweat glistened on his forehead. I tied the final knot and stepped back. He smiled. Is that your companion? He asked, nodding at Elisa. I glanced back and gave a sheepish grin. When I turned around, the magician held his hand high. It was free. The cord was dangling from his fingers like a snake's skin. The audience applauded, but I didn't, because something was wrong. The cord I tied had no knots. It was one solid piece. Back in my seat, Elisa nudged me. You okay? Yeah, I muttered, rubbing my hands. Just confused. She laughed. That's the whole point of magic, babe. I nodded, but the unease had grown roots. Something was watching, not from the stage, from beneath it. The big room felt colder now, not the kind of cold you feel through skin, but something deeper. Something that wrapped around your spine and whispered, you shouldn't be here. The chandeliers above flickered, casting long shadows that crawled up the walls like black fingers. Somewhere in the back rows, a woman coughed. No one laughed anymore. The energy had shifted. A stagehand rolled out a large box. 6 feet tall, wooden, ancient. It creaked and moaned as its wheels scraped across the polished floor. Iron brackets wrapped the corners. No embellishments, no hinges visible. Just a single peephole at the top, like a watching eye. The magician who followed it wasn't the usual sort. He didn't smile. He didn't wear sequins or make exaggerated gestures. He was tall, thin, and utterly still. The kind of stillness that doesn't belong to the living. His skin was pale as ash, and when he spoke, it felt like a breath inside my skull rather than a voice in the room. We need a volunteer, he said softly. A young man in the front row stood up, stiffly, mechanically. I didn't see him raise his hand. It was like the decision was made for him. He looked back at his wife. Or maybe his sister. She was holding a child on her lap, a little girl, no older than 5. Her eyes were fixed on her father as he slowly ascended the steps. Her small hand waved once. He didn't wave back. The magician opened the box, revealing darkness that felt too deep for such a shallow space. The man stepped in. A second later, the door closed behind him with a final, echoing thunk. No music played. No spotlight shifted. Just silence. A long, dragging silence that felt like it might never end. Then, click. The latch was thrown. The magician opened the box. It was empty. There were no gasps, no applause, just confused murmurs, a few polite claps that quickly died in the stagnant air. But I couldn't look away from the box. It had no hidden seams, no platform. I could see the floor through the plexiglass stage base, smooth, clean, uninterrupted. I'm not a magician, but I know enough to recognize a trick. This wasn't a trick. The magician knelt, unlatched each side of the box, and removed the panels slowly. One by one, he laid them flat on the stage floor. They made a sharp wooden crack as they hit the boards, like bones hitting a coffin. There was no trapdoor, no curtain drop, no second reveal, just absence. And then I looked at the girl in the front row. She was no longer smiling. She was crying, silently. No tears, just shaking, her tiny mouth trembling as her mother held her tightly, refusing to make eye contact with the stage. Elisa touched my hand. That was intense, she whispered. I didn't respond. I couldn't, because I'd just noticed something wrong with the magician. He wasn't bowing. He wasn't even looking at the audience. He was staring into the empty box, his mouth slightly open, as if he'd forgotten he was being watched, and his hands were shaking. The kind of tremble you see in people who've witnessed something they weren't supposed to. The show ended minutes later. No grand finale, no encore, just a staff member stepping on stage and politely asking us to proceed toward the lounge for a final toast. Elisa was already moving ahead, chatting with another couple. I stayed behind for a second, my eyes locked on the now abandoned stage. That box was gone. Completely. No stagehands had come to remove it. It had simply disappeared. The lounge was warm, quiet, too normal. Fireplace crackling, glasses of brandy on silver trays, a pianist playing something slow and nostalgic on a grand piano near the shelves. Elisa curled beside me on the couch, breath soft against my collarbone. I haven't had this much fun in forever, she whispered, tracing a finger down my arm. Yeah, I said hollowly. It's unforgettable. Come on, strong man. She kissed my cheek. Let's get out of here before the floor swallows us, too. I tried to smile. Yeah, just let me grab my jacket. I left it in the big room. Her smile faded slightly. You sure? Yeah, I said, standing. I put it on the edge of the stage before I tied the guy up. Her eyes lingered on mine for a moment, as if she wanted to stop me. But she didn't. Okay, she said slowly. Don't take too long. I nodded, turned, and left. The hallway back was wrong. Not different, wrong. The sconces on the wall were no longer flickering. They were dead. The paintings had changed. Where before there were Victorian portraits and whimsical illusions, now there were unfamiliar faces. People screaming behind glass. Men and women sinking into water. Children with mouths sewn shut. The carpet felt damp under my shoes. I turned a corner and nearly ran into someone. It was a man in a janitor's uniform. Same guy from earlier. Except this time he wasn't mopping. He was staring at the wall, whispering something over and over again. I caught 3 words before I passed. He's still screaming. The doors to the big room were ajar. Soft light leaked through, pulsating slowly like a heartbeat. I stepped inside, and my brain recoiled. Every magician I'd seen that night, now stood in a circle at the center of the stage, robed in garments darker than ink. Hoods obscured their faces, but I knew who they were. I recognized the trembling hands, the posture, the hush in the air around them. Kneeling in the center of the circle was the volunteer, the man who vanished. He was back, but he wasn't whole. His right hand was gone, torn, not cut, the stump wrapped in blood-soaked cloth. His eyes were swollen shut, and a dirty rag had been shoved into his mouth to silence him. He was shaking violently, begging. And then the magicians began to drink. One by one, each lifted a thin wine glass filled with thick, red liquid. The same wine glasses we'd used at the start of the night, but now, darker. The color of blood left too long in air. When the last magician drank, two of them reached for the handless man. He screamed into the gag. They didn't care. They lifted him and hurled him into nothing. A circle appeared, or maybe it had always been there and only now revealed itself. It wasn't a door or a portal or even a shadow. It was a wound in the world, and when the man passed through it, he was erased. No scream, no echo, just gone. Then came the light. White, searing beams burst from the void, spearing into each magician. Their heads snapped back, their mouths opened in silent ecstasy, and their bodies convulsed, as if possessed. Their veins lit up, their bones crackled beneath their skin like fireworks under flesh. I turned, I ran, and behind me, I swear I heard the sound of applause. I didn't stop running until I slammed shoulder first through a door and nearly toppled down a flight of velvet-carpeted stairs. My lungs burned. My pulse beat like a war drum in my ears. I had no plan, no route, just a single mantra, repeating in my head, "Get out, get out, get out." Behind me, the heavy door to the big room creaked slowly shut on its own, the wood groaning like something ancient that had just feasted. The hallway beyond was darker than before, longer, and different. The paintings that once depicted whimsical, magical scenes were now blank. Canvases stained with something that looked too much like smoke or ash. The ornate sconces glowed red, faint and pulsing, like veins. And the sounds? There were whispers in the walls, breathing from the floorboards, a child giggling, somewhere too far and too close at the same time. It's just a haunted house trick, I told myself. But no, this wasn't showmanship. This was hunger. I stumbled into the lounge where I'd left Elisa. But the fire had died. The pianist was gone. The couch where we'd curled together now sat empty, cushions indented where she'd once been. "Elisa?" I called out, voice rasping. Nothing. I stepped into the room, half expecting her to pop out with a glass of wine and a cheeky grin. But the place was wrong. The walls were too tall now. The shadows moved even when I didn't. The ceiling seemed to recede the longer I stared at it, like it was pulling upward into a vanishing point. And then I saw something on the floor, her earring. Gold, teardrop-shaped, the one she'd been wearing all night. I picked it up with shaking fingers. "Elisa?" I whispered again. Still nothing. But behind me, something laughed. I tore out of the lounge and into the hallway, blindly following the twisted architecture of the mansion. Corridors spiraled impossibly, stairs leading to nowhere. Doors that opened to brick walls, mirrors that reflected rooms I hadn't entered. The castle was changing, shifting around me like it was alive. No, I realized, not alive, sentient. It knew I was trying to leave, and it didn't want me to. I turned a corner and found myself staring down a hallway, bathed in cold blue light. At the far end stood a single wooden coat rack, and hanging on it, my jacket. I I froze. There was no way it could have been moved here. I left it on the edge of the stage. I saw the wine. I saw the man thrown into the black. I didn't come back for the jacket. I came back for Elisa. But there it was. My expensive, tailored jacket, untouched, waiting. I took one cautious step forward. The walls moaned. Another step. The lights above me flickered and buzzed. 10 feet away, I could smell the cologne I'd spritzed on the collar earlier that evening. I reached out, fingertips brushing the soft fabric. The jacket was warm, like someone had just worn it, and as my hand closed around the sleeve, something whispered directly into my ear, "You're part of it now." I spun around. No one. Just the silence, breathing. Then the hallway began to warp. Literally, the edges folded inward, the walls contracting like the inside of a throat. The air pressure surged. My ears popped. Run. I bolted. Down another hall, through a door I didn't remember opening. Upstairs that should have led down. The mansion had abandoned pretense. This wasn't about misdirection or magic anymore. It was a labyrinth, a feeding ground. I burst into a gallery lined with shattered mirrors. The room twisted around itself, fractals of my reflection, rippling outward like a broken kaleidoscope. In one shard, I saw myself, standing perfectly still. In another, Elisa stood next to me, her face blank, eyes hollow. In another, I wasn't human. Something long, gaunt, wearing my face like a mask. I screamed and turned away, gripping the jacket like a lifeline. The reflection screamed back. And then I saw the janitor again. Same uniform, same hollow stare. Only now he was standing in front of a door made of pitch black wood. It had no handle, no hinges, just a single phrase carved across its surface. "The price must be carried out." He looked at me and whispered, "You saw it, so now it sees you." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. He stepped aside, and the door, without touch, began to open. Inside was a staircase spiraling down into complete darkness. From the bottom, I heard her voice, "Help me, Elisa." I didn't think. I ran. The steps seemed endless. The deeper I went, the colder it became. My breath fogged the air. The walls pulsed gently, covered in veins like tree roots beneath skin. At the base, the corridor opened into a black chamber lit only by flickering candles floating midair. In the center, a circle of robes, the magicians. They stood unmoving, their faces hidden beneath dark hoods, but between them, lying on a stone slab, was Elisa, unconscious, bound by red silk, her face pale, her lips murmuring something in her sleep, words I didn't recognize, words that didn't belong in this world. I stepped forward, heart hammering. One of the robed figures raised a hand, and the chamber answered. The floor cracked open. Light, blinding, raw, ancient, erupted from beneath her. Symbols burned into the stone, glowing like magma. The air buzzed with static. From the circle's center, that same portal began to open. That thing I saw earlier, the wound in reality, the void. It reached for her, like it was claiming what was promised. I screamed and ran forward, but the magicians didn't move. They didn't need to, because the castle itself began to resist me, pulling the space between steps like elastic, slowing time, dragging my limbs like I was swimming through molasses. I fought, clawed forward, screamed her name. "Elisa!" Her eyes fluttered. She saw me, and for a moment, just a moment, she smiled. Then the portal swallowed her, and she was gone. The magicians lowered their hands, the candles vanished, the light died, and I collapsed, alone, clutching a warm jacket, in the dark. I don't know how long I lay there, Could have been minutes. Could have been hours. There's no time in that place, only pressure, weight, like the mansion was sitting on my chest, watching me with rooms instead of eyes. The stone was ice beneath me. My breath fogged and faded like I wasn't real anymore. Elisa was gone, and I had done nothing. No, that's not true. I had brought her here, and something had taken her. Eventually, the candles reignited, not with fire, but with sickly blue light. It wasn't warmth, it was memory, a projection of a moment I couldn't escape. The magicians remained frozen in their circle, 12 in total, unmoving beneath their robes. But now, their hoods were gone. I looked up, and I saw myself. 12 faces, all mine, a dozen versions of me, staring down through empty sockets, skin like wax, eyes burned out. Some smiled, some bled. One had no jaw, another had horns breaking through his scalp. They weren't illusions. They were reflections, futures I hadn't lived yet, destinies the house was offering or forcing. "You were chosen," said a voice behind me. I turned. The janitor stood there, hands clasped, uniform clean, eyes black. "No," I whispered. "I was tricked." "Same thing," he replied. "Choice is just the illusion that makes sacrifice bearable." "What the hell is this place?" He took a step forward. The magic castle has always stood here, long before the city, before the hills, before the stars aligned and gave humans fire. It has taken many forms, shrine, temple, fortress, but it has always needed. Needed what? I spat. "You," he said softly, "the audience." He gestured to the slab where Elisa had vanished. "You think the tricks are for amusement? Distraction? No. Each act is an offering, a slow wetting of the veil. The awe you feel, the fear, it cracks open the gate. To what? To the ones who watch," he whispered, "and drink, and give gifts in return." I backed away. "No, this is insane. This is just theater. Elaborate illusions. I'm dreaming." "You drank the wine," he said, stepping closer. "You crossed the threshold. You tied the rope. You left the jacket. You came back." He looked down at my hands. I hadn't realized I was still holding it. The jacket, heavy, warm, wet. I lifted it slowly. The inside lining was soaked through, dark, thick, sticky, blood. "Elisa didn't vanish," he said. "She was accepted." I dropped the jacket. "You're lying." "She smiled at the end, didn't she?" he said, "because she understood." I staggered back. "I need to leave. I need to get out of here." The janitor tilted his head. "You think you still exist outside these walls?" And he stepped aside. Behind him, another door opened. This time, I didn't descend. I rose. The stairs coiled upward like a spine, spiraling tighter the higher I climbed. The walls breathed. The stone turned to wood, then velvet, then glass. And then I reached it. A room of mirrors. Again. But this time, they showed things I hadn't lived. Elisa, smiling, sitting across from me at a cafe. Elisa, screaming, her face twisted in agony. Me, walking into the castle again. Me, performing on a stage. Me, in the circle. Me, throwing someone into the void. I stumbled forward. At the center of the room stood a podium, and on it, a book, bound in leather, titled in a language I didn't know, but still somehow read, The Book of Bindings. My name was on the first page. The pages flipped on their own, revealing scenes, sketched in black ink and blood-red pigment. I saw myself in everyone, helping, guiding, delivering victims, audience after audience, some willingly, some screaming. Each soul fed to the thing that lived beneath the castle, each one carving another line into the story of me. "I won't," I whispered. The room trembled. I won't do it." But my hands moved anyway. They turned the next page, and on it was Elisa, alive, bound in silk once more, eyes closed. Next to her, the words, "One taken may return, if another is offered in their place." My blood turned to ice. The room fell silent. All mirrors went black. Behind me, I felt the air shift. Someone stepped into the room. I turned. She was standing there, Elisa, whole, breathing, but not quite herself. Her eyes were wrong, too dark, too calm, like they'd seen beyond the veil and accepted what they found. "Elisa?" I asked. She nodded. "They let me go." I stepped forward, but she raised a hand. "At a price," she said. "What price?" She didn't answer, because she didn't need to. The door behind her opened. A man stumbled in, confused, laughing nervously, wearing a suit, glancing around, holding hands with a date who looked as enchanted as Elisa once had. A new guest, another audience member, just like me. The castle had opened its doors again. The show was about to begin. And I was holding the book, my name written in blood. Elisa smiled sadly. "You know what to do." I ran, again. But this time, no one chased me. No shadows lunged. No stairs twisted into knots. No voices echoed my name. It was worse than pursuit. It was permission. The castle let me go. The front doors stood open like a yawning jaw. Outside, the air was cold and clean. The Hollywood hills stretched below in silent reverence. Moonlight painted across their ridges. The black car that brought me was still there, engine quietly idling. The driver never turned his head. He just opened the back door, like this was a hotel, and I had checked out. I got in, didn't say a word, didn't dare. The city lights bled past the windows in a blur. I watched them like a ghost in the back seat. My reflection stared back at me in the dark glass. Pale, sunken-eyed, lips chapped from too many unspoken screams. I kept thinking I'd wake up, that I'd jolt upright in bed, drenched in sweat. Elisa beside me, whispering, "You okay?" But the ride stretched on, longer than it should. We drove through streets I didn't recognize, past neighborhoods that felt too quiet. Time didn't pass normally. My phone was dead. My watch spun its hands slowly in reverse. And then we stopped, in front of my apartment. The same cracked sidewalk, the same flickering streetlight. Home. I stepped out. The car vanished behind me with no sound, not even tire marks on the asphalt. I didn't look back. Inside, everything was exactly where I left it. My shoes by the door, the half-finished glass of whiskey on the counter, the window slightly cracked from earlier, letting in a breeze that smelled of city rot and dead jasmine. I checked the time. 3:47 a.m. Only a few hours had passed. It felt like a lifetime. My phone buzzed to life the moment I plugged it in. A rush of notifications filled the screen. Messages from friends, news articles, weather alerts. But nothing from Elisa. I didn't even have a missed call. No sign she'd ever texted me at all. I stared at the last photo I'd taken of her from earlier that night. Her smiling by the fireplace in the lounge, drink in hand. Then the photo glitched, just for a second. Her face warped, stretched, like a smear of wet paint being pulled downward. Then it corrected itself. I turned off the screen. I couldn't look at it again. I went to bed. I didn't sleep. I just lay there, listening to the hum of my refrigerator, the distant screech of a drunk somewhere in the alley, the slow thump of my own heartbeat. I escaped, I told myself. I made it out. Elisa too. She was free. She walked. She spoke. She smiled. But something about that smile was still wrong. There was peace in it, and also resignation. Like someone who had been shown the end of the story and accepted it. At 6:03 a.m., my body finally gave up. I slipped into a shallow, haunted sleep. When I woke, sunlight spilled across the room in long golden bars. Birds chirped outside. My lungs felt like they worked again. For a moment, it was over. I even smiled. Then I stepped outside to grab the paper, and I saw it. Folded neatly on my front steps, my jacket. The same one I had left at the castle. The same one I had held, soaked in blood. The same one I had dropped in a ritual room beneath a cursed mansion. Now sitting there like a gift, or a warning, or both. I picked it up with trembling hands, still warm, still damp. I reached into the pocket. My fingers brushed something smooth. I pulled out a single playing card, the Queen of Hearts. Except her eyes were missing, scratched out in deep gouges, and her mouth was open in a scream. Across the top, someone had written in small, neat letters, "A good magician never reveals the end." I dropped the card, stumbled back inside. The jacket hung itself on the coat rack. No breeze, no movement. It just slipped into place. Like it belonged. I locked all the doors, closed all the blinds, checked every room. Nothing. No blood. No sigils. No Elisa. I sat on the couch with a blanket wrapped around me like armor, the television playing static even when I unplugged it. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? Hi, I saw a man get sacrificed in a place that technically doesn't exist, and then the mansion might have replaced my girlfriend with a version of herself who's maybe still alive or maybe just a lure for others. Also, I think I'm part of the cult now. They'd either laugh or arrest me, or worse, they might know. I fell asleep again. Dreamt I was standing on the castle stage, wearing a tuxedo, spotlight burning hot on my face. A crowd watching from the shadows. No faces, just eyes. And in front of me, a box, locked, shaking. Someone was inside, screaming my name. I woke at midnight. The TV was still on. The screen showed only one thing now. A hallway. My hallway. Live footage. No camera was plugged in. No angle made sense. But there it was. My front door, just outside the living room, filmed in real time. I got up, walked to the door, opened it slowly. Nothing. Empty steps. Empty street. I turned around. The jacket was gone from the coat rack, and in its place, a top hat. The top hat sat on the coat rack like it had always been there. Velvet, black, perfectly shaped, dusted with a faint shimmer like powdered bone. I didn't touch it, didn't have to, because as I stood there in the doorway, jacket gone, hat watching me, a realization settled over me, cold and final. This was never about escaping. Not really. I closed the door, locking it 3 times. The hallway footage was still on the TV, but now the image had changed. Instead of showing the door from the outside, it showed me, standing still, watching myself. And the version on the screen began to move, smiling, raising a hand, waving. I stumbled backward and yanked the power cord out of the wall. The screen stayed on. Over the next few days, I tried to return to normal life. I went to work. I responded to emails. I showered, ate, slept, even joked with the barista at the coffee shop I used to visit with Elisa. But nothing was right. People looked through me. Elevators refused to stop on my floor. My reflection appeared a beat too late in mirrors. And the jacket, it always came back. I threw it out 3 times. First into the dumpster behind my building, then into a fire pit at the beach. Finally, sealed in a trash bag with bricks and sunk into the reservoir. Every morning, it was waiting on the coat rack, warm, clean, smelling faintly of wax and iron. On the 7th night, I found something new, a letter, folded neatly in the jacket's inside pocket. It was written on thick ivory paper in ink that shimmered like oil. The house remembers. The performance continues. Your next guest arrives at midnight. Don't be late. There was no signature, only a small embossed symbol at the bottom, the Ouroboros, a serpent swallowing its own tail. I crumpled the letter and threw it against the wall. Then I cried. The deep, body-shaking kind of crying that feels like it comes from someone else entirely. When it ended, I sat in silence and waited. Midnight came, and with it, the doorbell. Not a knock, not a pounding, just a soft, cheerful chime. 3 notes. I didn't move. It rang again and again, until I stood up, numb, hollow. I walked to the door and opened it. A man stood there, mid-30s, nervous smile, holding hands with a woman who looked excited, unsure, a little tipsy. They both wore formal clothes, a little overdressed for midnight in Los Angeles. The man smiled wider. Hey, this is the Magic Castle, right? My mouth opened. No sound came out. His smile faltered. We got this weird invite, hand-delivered. Just a black envelope with our names. No address. It just said, midnight, 1 night only, knock twice. So we figured. The woman cut in, giggling. We've been trying to get in for years. You're the magician, right? They looked at me like I was supposed to say something, like I was the host. I looked down at myself. I was wearing the jacket. The top hat sat on the table behind me, waiting. I nodded slowly. Yes, I said. Come in. The door closed behind them with a sound like a final curtain dropping. Inside, the lights dimmed automatically. Candlelight flickered along the hallway. The house breathed, shifting back into place. Rooms realigned. Paintings reappeared. The castle was alive again, and I was no longer its guest. I was part of the show. They wandered through the rooms, laughing and gasping, enchanted by levitating cards, vanishing coins, mirrors that winked back. They passed the piano that played itself, the hallway with too many doors, the wine that shimmered red and gold, and they drank. Like I had, I watched them move through the castle's illusions, like mice through a maze, except the maze wasn't trying to confuse them. It was tasting them, savoring their fear, their wonder, their awe. I followed silently, because that was my role now, not the magician, not the performer, the usher. Eventually, the couple reached the big room. It looked the same as the first time I entered. Velvet chairs, crystal chandelier, empty stage. They took their seats, holding hands. "Where's the show?" the woman asked. The man nudged her. "I think he is the show." They turned toward me. I stood at the edge of the stage, beneath the spotlight. I didn't remember walking there. Didn't remember stepping into the light, but it had found me anyway. The castle always knew its cues. The man laughed nervously. "You gonna pull a rabbit out of a hat?" I said nothing, just slowly extended a hand and pointed to him. "The strongest man in the room," I said quietly. He blinked. "Sorry." "I need your help," I continued, voice distant, rehearsed. "Step forward." He looked to his partner, confused. Then he stood. The castle shifted again. I smelled wax and blood. I handed him the rope. He tied my hands. Too loose. I told him, "Tighter." He pulled harder. The cords bit into my skin. The chandelier flickered. The floor beneath us grew warm. He stepped back. I lifted my hands, now free. He stared, stunned. His partner clapped, laughing. "How did you—" The lights dimmed. The box rolled onto the stage behind me. I hadn't seen it. But it had arrived, waiting, silent, hungry. I turned to the man and gestured to the box. He hesitated, but the castle was patient, always patient. Eventually, they always complied. He stepped in. I closed the lid, locked the latch, whispered something I didn't understand. But the castle did. It always does. And when I opened the box, he was gone. No applause, just silence. The kind that settles in a room after something important has ended, or begun. The woman looked confused. She didn't laugh anymore. I turned to her, offered my hand. She refused. The door behind her clicked shut. Too late. She looked around, realized, and started to scream. The castle exhaled, content. That was 3 weeks ago. There have been others, some excited, some skeptical, some terrified from the start. They all walk through the doors, and they all play their part. Because the castle doesn't stop. It just waits for the next performance. And me? I wear the jacket. I keep the hat near the door. I smile when the bell rings at midnight, because the show must go on. And I no longer remember what my life was before it began. Only that it ended with a magic trick, and started again. With a jacket, still warm,